So, good morning. We are different location this morning. Chapter 12, Danny Champion of the World. The next day was Thursday, and before we set off for the walk to my school this morning, I went around behind the caravan and picked 2 apples from our tree. One for my father and one for me. It is the most marvelous thing to be able to go out and help yourself to your own apples whenever you feel like it. You can do this only in the autumn, of course, when the fruit is ripe. But all the same, how many families are so lucky? No one in 1,000, I would guess. Our apples were called Cox's Orange Pippins, and I liked the sound of the name almost as much as I liked the apples. At 8 o'clock we started walking down the road towards my school in the pale autumn sunshine, munching our apples as we strode along. Clink went my father's iron foot each time he put it down on the hard road. Clink, clink, clink. "Have you brought money to buy the raisins?" I asked. He put his hand in his trouser pocket and made the coins jingle. "Will Cooper will be open so early?" "Yes," he said. "They open at 8:30. I really love those morning walks to school with my dad." We talked practically the whole time, mostly as it was he who talked and I just listened. And just about everything he said was fascinating. He was a true countryman. The fields, the streams, the woods, and all the creatures who lived in these places were part of his life. Although he was a mechanic by trade and a very fine one, I believe he could have become a great naturalist if only he had had a good schooling. Long ago, he had taught me the names of all the trees and the wildflowers and the different grasses that grew in the fields. All the birds too I could name, not only by sighting them, but by listening to their calls and their songs. In springtime, we would hunt for birds' nests along the way, and when we found one, he would lift me up on his shoulder so I could peer into it to see if there were eggs. But I never was allowed to touch them. My father told me a nest with eggs is one of the most beautiful things in the world. I thought so too. The nest of a song thrush, for instance, lined its inside with dry mud as smooth as polished wood, with 5 eggs of the purest blue speckled with black dots. And the skylark, whose nest we once found right in the middle of the field in a grassy clump on the ground. It was hardly a nest at all, just a little hollow in the grass, and in it were 6 small eggs, deep brown and white. "Why does the skylark make its nest on the ground where cows can trample it?" I asked. "Nobody knows why," my father said, "but they always do it. Nightingales nest on the ground too. So do pheasants and partridges and grouse." On one of the walks, a weasel flashed out of the hedge in front of us, and in the next few minutes I learned a lot of things about the marvelous little creature. The bit I liked best was when my father said, "The weasel is the bravest of all animals. The mother will fight to death to defend her own children. She will never run, not even from a fox, which is 100 times bigger than her. She will stay beside her nest and fight the fox until she is killed." Another time, when I said, "Just listen to that grasshopper, Dad," he said, "No, that's not a grasshopper, my love, it's a cricket. And did you know the crickets have their ears in their legs? It's not true, it's absolutely true. And grasshoppers have their sides of their tummies. They are lucky to be able to hear at all, because nearly all the vast hordes of insects on this earth are deaf as well as dumb and live in a silent world." On this Thursday, on this particular walk to school, there was an old frog croaking in the stream behind the hedge as it went by. "Can you hear him, Danny?" "Yes," I said. That is a bullfrog calling to his wife. He does it by blowing out his dewlap and letting it go with a burp." "What is a dewlap?" I asked. "It's the loose skin on his throat. He can blow it up just like a balloon." "What happens when his wife hears him?" "She goes hopping over to him. She is very happy to have him have been invited. But I'll tell you something very funny about the bullfrog. He often becomes so pleased with the sound of his own voice that his wife has to nudge him several times before he'll stop his burping and turn around to hug her." That made me laugh. "Don't laugh too loud," he said, twinkling at me in with his eyes. "We men are not so very different from the bullfrog." We parted at the school gates, and my father went off to buy the raisins. Other children were streaming in through the gates and headed up the path to the front door of the school. I joined them but kept silent. I was the keeper of a deep secret, and a careless word from me could blow the lid off the greatest poaching expedition the world had ever seen. Ours was just a small village school, a squat, ugly red brick building with no upstairs rooms at all. Above the front door was a big grey block of stone cemented into the brickwork, and on the stone it said, "This school was erected in 1902 to commemorate the coronation of His Royal Highness King Edward VII. I must have read that thing 1,000 times. Every time I went in that door, it hit me in the eye. I suppose that is what it was there for, but it was pretty boring to read the same old words over and over and over again. And I often thought how nice it would be if they put something different up there every day, something really interesting. My father would have done it for them beautifully. He could have written it with a bit of chalk on the smooth grey stone, and each morning would have been something new. He would have said things like, 'Did you know that the little yellow clover butterfly often carries his wife around on his back?' Another time he might have said, 'The guppy has funny habits. When he falls in love with another guppy, he bites her on the bottom.' And another time, 'Did you know that death's head's moth can squeak?' And then again, 'Birds have almost no sense of smell, but they have good eyesight and they love red colours. The flowers they like are red and yellow, but never blue.' And perhaps another time he'd get out his chalk and write, 'Some bees have tongues which they can unroll until they are nearly twice as long as the bee itself. This is to allow them to gather nectar from flowers. They have very long, narrow openings.' Or he might have written, 'I'll bet you didn't know that in some English country houses the butler still has to iron the morning newspaper before putting it on his master's breakfast table.' There were about 60 boys and girls in our school, and the ages went from 5 to 11. We had 4 classrooms and 4 teachers. Miss Birdseye taught the kindergarten, the 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and she was a really nice person. She used to keep a bag of aniseed balls in the drawer of her desk, and anyone who did good work would be given 1 aniseed ball to suck right there and then during the lesson. The trick with aniseed balls is never to bite them. If you keep rolling them around in your mouth, they will dissolve slowly on their own accord, and then right in the very center you'll find a tiny brown seed. This is the aniseed itself, and when you crush it between your teeth, it has a fabulous taste. My father told me that dogs go crazy about it. When there aren't any foxes around, the huntsmen will drag a bag of aniseed for miles and miles over the countryside, and the foxhounds will follow the scent because they love it too. That is known as a drag hunt. The 7 and 8-year-olds are taught by Mr Corrado, and he also is a decent person. He was a very old teacher, probably 60 or more, but that didn't seem to stop him being in love with Miss Birdseye. We knew he was in love with her because he always gave her the best bits of meat at lunch, and when it was his turn to do serving, and when she smiled at him, he would smile back at her in the soppiest way you can imagine, showing all his front teeth, top and bottom, and most of others as well. A teacher called Captain Lancaster took the 9 and 10-year-olds, and this year that included me. Captain Lancaster, known sometimes as Lankers, was a horrid man. He had a fiery carrot-coloured hair and a little clipped carroty moustache and a fiery temper. Carroty-coloured hairs were also sprouting out of his nostrils and ear holes. He had been a captain in the army during the war against Hitler, and that was why he called himself Captain Lancaster instead of just plain Mr. My father said it was an idiotic thing to do. There were millions of people still alive, he said, who had fought in that war, but most of them wanted to forget the whole beastly thing, especially those crummy military titles. Captain Lancaster was a violent man, and we were all terrified of him. He used to sit at his desk stroking his carroty moustache and watching us with pale, watery blue eyes, searching for trouble. And as he sat there, he would make a queer snuffling grunt through his nose, like some dog sniffing around a rabbit hole. Mr Snoddy, our headmaster, took the top form, the 11-year-olds, and everybody liked him. He was a small round man with a huge scarlet nose. I felt sorry for him having a nose like that. It was so big and inflamed that it would look like it might explode at any moment and blow him up. Funny thing about Mr Snoddy was that he always brought a glass of water with him into class, and this he kept sipping right through the lesson. At least everyone thought it was a glass of water. Everyone, that is, except me and my best friend Sidney Morgan. We knew differently, and this is how we found out.